Wait, I think we're good now. All right, what's up, guys? Let's go. Oh, display, please. Okay, okay. So, welcome to our PR workshop. My name is Vishal. I'm the head of the HackMIT dev team.
I'm Richard. I'm a member of the HackMIT dev team.
Yeah, so during this workshop, we're gonna accomplish a few things. I guess the first thing is to set up Git, just the version control system. So this will help you guys get started with developing your own web applications and sort of managing different codes, especially when working on a team. And then we'll try to make our own web app from there. So let's get started. Have you guys used Git before? A few times? You?
Once.
Twice, I think. So you guys installed Git on your laptops before? Basically, Git allows you guys to manage different versions of your code. So this is really useful when multiple people are working with the same code base. And essentially, there's a bunch of different ways to collaborate, and Git is sort of the best way to collaborate with code because it's really easy. It makes it easy to manage different versions of your code and merge and make changes and so forth. So basically, Git basically maintains different versions of this code in these steps called commits. And this is useful because it allows you to view how your code has progressed as you make changes. And in particular, you can go back to old commits at any point. So it sort of saves these versions of your code. And likewise, whenever you're adding features to your code, you can add these features in terms of commits. And then when those features are ready, you can merge those commits back into your main code base. So do you guys all have GitHub accounts? Cool. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our command line interface. Basically, the command line allows you to interact with your computer in a more direct fashion with these commands. Have you guys used the terminal before? So what are some things we can do with our terminal? Yeah, you can change directories in your file system. What else? Yeah, you can list out your files, ls, right? So do you guys have Windows or Macs? Ubuntu? Do you have what WSL?
No.
Do you just have a Ubuntu machine? Pretty cool.
I tried to do boot, but I accidentally deleted those.
Oh, happens. Honestly, that's for the better. Oh, wait. Yeah, okay. So Mac and Linux or Ubuntu are pretty similar. They're both POSIX compliant operating systems, so they have a similar commands. So for example, mkdir allows you to make a new directory in your current folder. C allows you to change into another directory. So cd ... moves you back into the previous directory, and then ls lists all the files in your current directory. So we're going to be using these commands in our new project. So yeah, type these, test them out. Yeah, so for Windows people, basically we encourage people to get Ubuntu, like you said. So there's this thing called WSL, which is not exactly like dual boot, but essentially it allows you to run Ubuntu on top of the Windows operating system. Richard has used it before. But some steps, since none of you guys have Windows, we won't be going through this right now. But yeah, pretty useful for everyone who has Windows and is trying to follow along. Okay, so let's try to test out these commands. So if I go into a terminal, let me move this down. I'm currently in my home directory. So in my directory, I have a lot of different files for my different projects and different sections. So if I wanted to create a directory in my home folder, what command should I use? Yeah, mkdir. So then I can make a directory called dir, for example. And once I make this directory, I can now cd into it. So right now, this directory. Right now, it's empty. So what if I wanted to create a file in this directory? What command would I use?
mkdir file name.
So mkdir is for directories, right? It's like make directory mkdir. What about just a normal file? But good idea though.
Right.
So the command is called touch. So touch allows you to make a new file. So let's say touch hello.txt. So now I have this file here. And what if I wanted to like write to this file? So if you guys use like an IDE before, like VS Code, for example. So if I open this directory in VS Code, I can view this hello.txt file. I can write something to it. Hello world. Save. All right, cool. So now I have this file that's saved in my home directory. And for example, I could like print out the contents of this file with cat. So hello world. Cool. So there's just some basic commands we can use. So you guys have all installed Git, but basically if you haven't, there's a few commands you can use to install Git. Once you install Git, you should configure it to match your like name and email, so you can keep track of it on GitHub. So here's instructions how to do that. Cool. Yeah, so there's sort of 3 different steps when it comes to changing a directory with Git. So the first step is to make the changes on your computer. So when you make the changes, it's called making changes locally. Not everyone can see your changes yet, right? So how do I tell Git that I made changes to my project? Yeah. So you first have to run this command called git add. So git add will basically add all the files into Git. So Git is aware of these local changes, but it's not made into a commit yet. In order to make all your stage changes into a commit, you then run git commit. And once you run git commit, you run git push. So git push will push all your local commits into the main branch of the project, so that other people, when they pull the code from the GitHub repository, they can see the new changes. So let's look at an example. So we have this repository called github setup.git. Let me find it. GitHub setup, I think. Yeah. All right, so here's some directory. So here's a Git repository. You can see here that there's 3 files in this directory. One readme.md, jamiefu.txt, and run.py. So one Python file, one text file, and one markdown file. So in order to clone this into our local file system, we basically run git clone on this URL. So copy this here. And then let's see. Let's git clone that one, and then let's clone it into the directory we just made. Oh, it's not empty. So let's delete it. Git clone. And I can cd into GitHub setup. So that basically that directory just clone into our local repository. And then I can cd into it. And then if I press ls, I can see the 3 files from GitHub. Does that make sense? So now these 3 files I can view on my local system. I can open it in VS Code. So say I wanted to make a change to this file. So change this markdown file to say, hello, this is HackMIT. All right, cool. So now I made this change, but when I refresh my GitHub repository, I don't see the change. So how do I reflect the changes here? What are the steps? Yeah, so git add. So git add dot will add all the files in the repository, but if you only want to add a certain file, you can specify the file name. So git add readme.txt. Oh, MD. Like that. Oops, should be dot. Okay, so dot means our local directory, and then slash readme.txt. Readme.md is the name of that file. So once I add it, if I write git status, I can see that I have these changes. It's in green, which means I've added it to my currently staged files, but I haven't committed it yet. So what if I want to commit this file? What's the command? Yes, git commit. -m will say the message for a commit. Let's say changed readme. Then it's committed, and then to push it to the local repository, I just write git push. Okay, let me. Again, I have a token.
You don't.
Okay, don't worry about it. But basically, I'll put in your username and password, and you push it, and it'll reflect there. But I won't do that right now. Okay, cool. So that's how Git works. So now let's talk about how to make a basic website. Oh, what's up? We're having our beginner workshop.
Yes, I know, but
Oh yeah, you're covering our first web app. Do you have your laptop on you?
yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you can get.
Like merging branches and stuff like I basically just like I only work alone, but like presumably if you're on a team.
Yeah. So we can briefly talk about that. Basically, branches are essentially versions of the code that different people might work on. For example, say you want to add a feature, but you don't want to push it to, you want to share the code with other people, but you don't want to push it to the main like repository yet. So you might add that section to a branch, for example. So the way you do that is you write git branch -b and then the branch name. I'll just call it hello. Did that work? Oh wait, git checkout. Okay, yeah, so git checkout, we'll check out. So now I'm on this current, so I was on main branch before, you can see my terminal, and now I'm on the hello branch. And say I wanted to like add a file to this branch, right? So I write, so in the ls, I have these 3 files. So say I want to touch new file dot text, right? And then I add this file and I commit. Add a new file to branch. And then I want to push these changes to the branch, right? I want to push it to main. So I write git push origin hello. And then once you put in your password username, it'll push there.
So when they like if you want to actually like merge that with main.
Yeah, so then you switch to the main branch. So and you write git merge hello. So you see the new file.txt merged into my current branch. So if I press ls, I have a new file.txt. So this is pretty easy. So for example, say you have a branch, you make a new branch and you have so if someone makes a change to main and you want those new changes to be in your new branch, then you can merge with main, like git merge main. And then if you want to merge back to main, you write git merge in the branch name.
Okay, so like suppose you have a situation where one person A is working on their branch A.
Yeah.
And person B is working on branch B. They both pulled from like the original name.
Yeah.
And they made changes, but then when person A now like pushes their branch, it like changes stuff that like person B has now, when they try to push it, it's like some conflict.
Yeah.
How do you resolve that?
Yeah, so Git has this sort of built-in thing for managing merge conflicts. That's what it's called. Basically, if there's any sections of code that conflict, Git will sort of ask you to pick which one you want, one by one. So as you resolve the merge, you basically have to choose you want this one versus this one, right?
So you go line by line.
Yeah, you go through. It's like, yeah, it's not necessarily line by line because Git will be smart and like try to minimize or try to figure out like exactly which sections are in conflict, not the whole file. So like line by line that are in conflict, you sort of pick, okay, I want this one, I want this one. And there's like nice UI for like determining these different changes.
The UI.
Yeah. So like on GitHub, for example, you can just press a button. So say like you want change A or change B, and you just press A and then you'll get it. And yeah, if you do it on just when your file itself, then you might have to like comment out the code or remove it, delete it or not. But basically you resolve the merge, then you push the corrected merge into the branch itself as a new commit.
And if you're using like VS Code or something, that like you can also do it like integrated in the thing.
Yeah.
Wait.
Like you can if you have a merge conflict and you're using VS Code,
Yeah.
like something will like pop up and then you'll see like 2 different
Oh.
versions of the code side by side. And you can like click buttons and stuff and
Yeah.
see like which one you want.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, we could demonstrate that like really quick. Like for example, say I make a change in a new file. So I add like ASDF, and then
You have to push.
I don't have to push, right?
Oh,
I'm just kidding.
okay, sure.
So I commit this change, right? And that, well, if I go back to hello, right? Currently, what's a new file in hello?
I don't remember.
Well, it's blank, right? I didn't add anything.
Change.
Yeah. So what if I changed new file in hello and I try to merge back into main, for example? So in new file, I say like different change. Then if I check out main again, and I get merge hello, look what it says. There's a merge conflict, right? Do you see that?
Where's the different change? Oh, wait. Oh, I see. Okay.
Right. So right now there's a merge conflict. So the automatic merge failed. So Git will try to automatically merge these two files, and if it can't, it'll tell you there's a conflict. And so the way you resolve this conflict is you view the file and look what it says here. My current change is ASDF, right? But the new change is a different change. So I have to say, like, do I want a current change? Do I want the incoming change? Or I could even accept both, for example. There's different ways to manage these conflicts, right? And it's up to you to decide, right? So once I just choose what I want, say I do actually want both, right? So I press accept both changes, and now both lines appear one after another. I save this file, and then I add this file and I commit it. And I'm done. Does that make sense? So that's how you resolve merge conflicts. Okay, cool. So that's enough for Git. We'll still be using Git, but we're gonna start making our website. So if you guys have any experiences with web development before?
Made like some Mickey Mouse web thing when you're like ninth grade.
Was it that use like HTML, CSS? What about, sorry, what's your name again? Roadies? Yeah. Did you have an experience?
No, never.
Not really?
But
Yeah. It's pretty fun. What about Block? You?
the other website.
Svelte? Nice. Yeah, I like Svelte. It's cool.
Sean's a big svelte enthusiast.
Yeah, so there's basically three different parts to the front end component of a web page: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So these are the sort of components that directly interact with the user. Do you guys heard of these terms before? Like how exactly they are incorporated into a web page? Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's get started really quick. Basically the goal is to create this like math game. Basically, there's like two modes, easy mode, hard mode, and they'll like give you a math problem, and then you have to input whether you think it's right or wrong, and you get a score. And if you get it wrong, the game ends. So pretty simple. So basically, there's going to be three different pages. The index page, that's the page where you enter when you first get started with the web page. It'll say like which mode you want and so forth. Game.html will display the actual game, and then over.html will display when you lose. So let's get started. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's the essential structure for a website, and it tells the browser like how to display the content on the website. So all of them have this like .html extension. Basically, there's everything in the HTML file is enclosed in these HTML tags. So the first tag is this like doc type HTML, which basically indicates where the HTML file starts. And then inside the HTML tag is a opening tag and a closing tag. That's where all the content will reside. So the header is in this head tag. This sort of displays meta information about the website, like things like the title, for example. Like you see on this like Google Slides page, it says like how to hack panel at the top, right? So that information is not actually displayed on the website, but it's like somewhere that the browser displays some other way. So that's called metadata. So metadata can include things like titles, descriptions, and it might like import other files that might be used in the website as well. And the body is the second tag. That'll basically have all the actual content that's displayed. And then the last sort of type of tag is this comment tag, which essentially things that won't be rendered on the page. So let's get started with making the HTML for our website. So basically, for the header tag, we'll just call it my website. So one thing about header tags is like sometimes the information here is like really important for search engines because search engines won't like actually look through all the website content, and it might just look for the content inside of the header tags, like things like description and title. So that's sort of how Google like optimizes its search engine. It only doesn't look through the page itself, it just looks through this metadata. So if you want your website, for example, to be like at the top of the list in the search engine, you want to make sure your metadata is like very detailed, for example. And then here we have a link. So this links to an asset that'll be displayed on the page. So in particular, this will be like the sort of favicon page. You see in the top, there's like this little icon here for all the web pages. Basically, if you write shortcut icon in the link tag, is one of the attributes, it'll display that image here. So asset/logo.png will be displayed as this like little favicon up here. That's another thing that we can use in our header tags. Okay, so let's look at the body. So the body is going to have sort of two sections of content. The first section will sort of have like the welcome message. And then the rest of it will have the sort of links to easy and hard mode. So the first step is to have this welcome icon. So here we're using header tags, H1. So this will sort of display big text. So it'll say welcome and then paragraph tag. And this will be a smaller text ready to play. Basically, when you write any HTML tag, you can apply these different attributes to them. So the first attribute we'll talk about is class. Class is sort of a way to group our elements together. So for example, I have this class called buttons, right? And there's two buttons inside of this tag. And say I wanted to, and when we talk about CSS, we'll get back to these classes, but essentially it allows us to style these components by their class name. So if I have multiple components with the same class, I can sort of group them all together and apply styles to them together. ID is a little bit different. Even though multiple elements can have the same class, this ID is unique to the element itself. So it allows us to specifically identify a single element in our HTML page. Finally, style. These are like inline CSS that applies to an element, which we'll see later. But yeah, let's see how our page looks so far. So here's the website we're going to make. I have the different sections we're going to be going through as like branches. So I check out the first branch, HTML. It's this one, right? Yeah. And then, so here's our HTML file that we just saw. So pretty rudimentary, but if you try to open it in our browser, so you can right click and then press show in browser. This is what it looks like so far. So welcome is in the H1 tags up here, ready to place our paragraph, and then we have these two buttons. So one quick thing is notice that our buttons are styled a certain way, like they're blue, for example. This is because we imported some styles automatically. So basically CSS is what we use to style our components. So applying things like color, font, size, width, etc. In this sort of format called cascading style sheets. Essentially, the way you do this is you create this .css file and then you link the CSS file in the header tags. So the basic structure of a CSS file is you first write what you want to style. So if you write P here, that stands for the paragraph tags. And then inside of this, inside these curly brackets, you describe exactly how you want to style it. So for example, if I want to change the font, I can write font family and then the value, like Verdana. And if I want to change the color, I could write like color black, for example. So let's try to add some CSS to our file. So we first can link a CSS file. So I can write styles.css. And then I linked it like here. So we write a style sheet that refers to a CSS file, and then the href is the link. So this file name is styles.css. So anything in here will directly affect our HTML page. So this is our current website. So how do you think we can style this to make it look cooler?
Like center and stuff first.
Yeah, so we want to center it first, right? So how do we center a div? This is a, yeah, so you don't have to actually center the div. So we know like the div I inspect element here, we have this body, right? So the div is already takes up the whole page, right? So I just need to center the content of the div, right? So there is an attribute called like text align that allows us to align just text, right? So let's try to use that here. No, wait a second, let me pull up the repository as well. You have it there? Oh, yeah, actually, you can just keep it there. So let's see. So in styles.css, we have all of our content in this div, and this div has an ID of container, right? So I want to apply the styles to my container because I want to sort of affect everything in this container, right? So the way I do that is for ID, you write this pound sign and you write container. So any CSS in here will be applied to the container div. So the first thing we can do to center it, so we said text align. I think this might work. Or is it? I think for center, you can do margin, right? Yeah. Oh, I think I have to do it properly. Should be fine. Let me inspect. So here's our container. Yeah, margin overwrites that, right? Yeah, CSS is hard. Yeah, we can make it a flex box. So write display flex, and I can write align items after that, right? That did something. You just check out the section. Do you know which branch is on? Oh wait, we changed the flex direction. Okay, so flex basically groups item into a flex box, but you just specify the direction you want the items to go. So they can be in a row or a column, right? So I write flex direction column. Now it's arranged in a column, right? Okay, cool. So this looks a little bit better, not centered. I don't think I need margin. Yeah, I don't need margin auto anymore. So now I want to sort of what can I do now to our page? It's maybe we can move it to the center, right? The object itself. So for that, we need to apply some margin to the top of the container. So I can write margin top. And then here I put a value, like for example, pixels might work. So I write like 10 pixels. It's not enough, right? Oh, Mark. Thank you. Yeah, so move down a little bit, right? So let's move down a little bit more with 100. A little bit better. 200. All right, cool. This looks good. What else can we do? Yeah, so make it font bigger for sure. So let's see what we have here. So we have title. Okay, so let's change the title. Let's add a class to it. So let's say or ID title. And then now I want to style this title. So let's write title. and then I can write like font size and like some number of pixels again. So like 50 pixels. So that's a little bit bigger. Does that make sense? I can even make it like bold, for example. So like font weight bold. Cool. What other styles do we have? So one thing we can do is here we have these A tags. So A tags basically allow you to link an HTML div to a different page. So right now, if I click on easy mode, what's going to happen? Where will I get sent to? /easy, right? But we don't have /easy yet, so that's not super helpful. But basically, if I want to style that div, I could instead just write like A, for example. So A will style any A tag. So I change this color to red.
Oh, wait.
Oh, I changed the body first, yeah. So let's change the background color. Here's a hex value. I think it's white, right? All right. Okay, let's try to. So basically, background color allows you to color any div, and you can sort of set the color with any like hex value. So yeah. You also change like the width and height of divs with the width and height elements. And then you can apply margin. So margin basically positions an object relative to its parent div. So here we apply like a margin top to that div to make it move downwards because we applied this margin. And you can sort of see this margin if you inspect. So here the orange part, that's margin. So that allows you to position elements inside of your container. And then this whole other like bunch of different attributes you can apply, like font size, font family, like we saw, and then different things like border and padding. Padding allows you to move elements within a div. So like if I apply like, so if you apply like padding 10 pixels, basically the content within ID will be padded by 10 pixels on the outside. So it moves it sort of inside versus outside. If that makes sense. Okay, cool. So sometimes you don't want to write CSS from scratch. So there's a useful tool called like Bootstrap that allows you to import like a giant CSS file that sort of comes in with these like pre-built styles. So basically, if you include this like link to an external URL as a style sheet, you can sort of import all these Bootstrap styles automatically. So it's pretty useful if you don't want to write your CSS from scratch. Okay, cool. So putting all together, we have our first web page. You see, once you apply all these styles to it, it'll look like this. Do you want to share that?
Wait, you can just like gotta check out the branch.
What's the branch called?
Just in the head. Or,
Oh wait, but you have to. That's not the Flask server, right? So
wait, which?
you're hosting it the Flask server, so it's too much work. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, yeah, let's just move on. So now let's set up the actual game page. For that, we need to create 2 more HTML files. So this one will display like the actual game HTML. I won't like walk you through this, but you can sort of look at the code yourself afterwards if you want. And then we have one that's like a game over page. So that'll look like this. We have the game over, score, and then an href to link you back to the home page to try again. All right, cool. So now how are we going to make these buttons actually work and the text actually display numbers? For that, we're going to use JavaScript. So if you guys heard of JavaScript before, what does JavaScript do to a web page?
Makes stuff fancy.
Yeah, it makes stuff fancy. It makes them more interactive. So we're going to write some JavaScript to sort of interact with these elements on our page. So basically how JavaScript, it's very similar to how CSS is imported, but instead we're going to use a script tag. So basically we write the script tag, and this can be anywhere in your file. Generally, it'll be in the header, but you can put it in the body as well. We import this as a JavaScript file, and then we write the URL game.js. So .js is the extension for JavaScript files, and JavaScript is like a whole different programming language where you can create variables, do logic and operations, and have those operations interact with the web page. So the way you create variables is with the let or var keyword, and you can create constants with the const keyword. So how does JavaScript actually interact with the web page? Well, this goes back to when we applied the IDs and classes to the elements. So in JavaScript, you can sort of grab these elements by using the get element by ID function. So for example, we have our element title, right? Which we created with an ID, right? When we made the title with ID title, say I want to change the inside of title, right? So what I do is I write document.getElement by ID title, and the inside of that div will be its .inner HTML attribute. So if I change it .inner HTML to hard mode, if I see that it is hard mode, then I can see like I can change some variable like the max number to 200, for example. So document.getElement by ID title.inner HTML will give us the inner HTML of the HTML attribute with ID title. Does that make sense? So let's see what more like logic we can use here. So can I import it? So let me check out HTML template. So reset will just change, we'll just get rid of all the changes I just made. So I did that. Okay, let me delete this now. All right, cool. So this is the next step. So let's see what the page looks like now. Oops. All right, so this will open. Oh wait, I need to open index.html. All right, cool. So here's our site now. So we applied some new styles from before. Here's a quick glance at that. But basically, we created these two game.html and over.html files. So these include the HTML for the game and the HTML for the over page. So here we have easy mode and hard mode. So if I link to easy mode, it sends me to /easy. Otherwise, it sends me to /hard. Right now, these routes don't work yet. And once we create our server, we'll make these routes work. But for now, we'll finish our JavaScript logic. So let's see. So game.js will sort of allow us to play our game. So let me open this here. Okay, so the first step is to make this page work with JavaScript. So right now, it's going to display a math problem, right? And then there's going to be two options to either say it's right or it's wrong. If it's wrong, we press X, and if it's right, we press check. So going to game.html, we see we have a container. At the top, it says hard mode. And we have this container here with our two buttons. One of them is the check and one of them is the X. But notice that I don't have any numbers here, right? Because I need the JavaScript to put the numbers in for me because it's sort of dynamic. It's going to change as I play the game, right? So the idea here is we first create a div where our numbers are supposed to go. And so that's going to be in this div called prompt. And then through JavaScript, I'm going to insert the numbers into this div called prompt with the .inner HTML like we saw before, right? So if you look at the index, look at the JavaScript file, game.js, we have a bunch of functions here. So basically, how it's going to work is when we first load the page, this JavaScript file will run, right? So the first thing is here is it calls this get new problem function, right? Now let's see how this function is defined. So first, it's going to get these three elements. So one of them is called correct. So correct is the button that has the check mark, right? Wrong is the button with the X mark here, right? Because it has ID wrong. And then prompt is that div that has nothing right now, right? Because we're going to put our question in here. So let's ignore this. This is for handling the click events. And let's first see how we actually get the question. So first, going to call these two get random int functions on max number. So what is max number? Well, max number by default, it's 30. But if it sees that we're in hard mode by looking at the inner HTML of title, it's going to change it to 200. Does that make sense? So it sort of interacts with the page by seeing the content. And so get new problem will then pick two random integers to put in our math problem. So let's see how that does it. So first, we have this adjust array. This will basically change the correct answer to make it sometimes wrong and sometimes right. So that the solution it displays will add the two numbers and then add this sort of like offset, right? So a third of the time it'll be right, a third of the time it'll be off by one and positive, and a third of the time it'll be off by one in the negative direction, right? So now we have to change the inner HTML of prompt, right? We can do this with a templated string. Basically, we have a string here with these like backticks, and $ with curly brackets means to insert a variable into the string, right? So I want to insert number 1 plus number 2 equals the displayed solution, number 3. Does that make sense? Then if I do prompt the inner HTML equals this, then it's going to display that in the inner HTML, right? So for example, if I just change the string to like, I don't know, ASDF, then it's going to display ASDF inside instead. But I want to display the math problem here. All right, cool. So now how do we handle these clicks, right? Well, once I handle the click, I need to check whether it's actually right or actually wrong, right? So basically, if number 1 plus number 2 is actually equal to the number we displayed, then we add these two event listeners for the correct and wrong objects. So the add event listener will basically run this function whenever I click on it. So if it's correct and I click on the click button, I should get the correct answer, right? Our correct answer function. But if it's wrong and I click on it when it's actually right, I should lose the game, right? Game over. So let's see what the correct answer function does. Basically, it gets a new problem. So we get another problem. It adds 1 to our score. So score plus plus adds 1 to our score. And then it sets the score at the score display to the score value. So for example, if I get this problem right, check, it changes score. Okay, so score is not on this page, but it's on a different page. So you don't have to worry about it now, right? Oh, do you see it?
You can just try adding it.
Okay, yeah, so I don't see score in the HTML right now, so let's try to add it ourselves. So we just need to add a div with ID equal to score, right? So it's not formatted right, but it's displaying it right here. Actually, let me add it inside this container. This is wrong. Okay, now do you see it? So I have this ID score here, and this content gets inserted with JavaScript. Okay, so that's pretty much how this JavaScript works. Obviously, when you get a new problem, you have to remove these listeners so that you can write them again, depending on whether the answer is right or wrong. But if I say get the question wrong, oops. I get sent to this over page, which we'll route later. Okay, cool. That's basically how the logic of this game works. So that's kind of how JavaScript is used. Right. Okay. So basically, document refers to the entire HTML file. And document has a bunch of attributes that allow us to interact with the page. For example, get element by ID allows us to fetch elements with a specific ID. And then .inner HTML allows us to change the inner HTML of that document, of that container. Okay. So yeah, we talked about the logic here. So now we're going to handle the routing. So this is sort of the more complicated part of a web application, right? Because by itself, we can open and view HTML files when we interact with them, but we can't actually change how they're routed in a web page. When you go to a website and you go to / something, it might give you a different web page, right? But this routing is handled by a server. So we're going to try to host this server ourselves using Flask. So Flask is basically a Python-based framework that allows us to create web applications and manage hosting and routes. So you guys used Python before? Installed it? Yeah, so you might have ran like Python scripts before. We're going to use a Python script to run Flask. So basically, you have to install pip, which is the Python like package manager, and then install Flask, which is the module we're going to be using to host our app. So yeah, so if you have your computer on you, right, Locke? If you want to clone, yeah, so here's the repository if you want to clone it. It's just github.com/techx/howtohack2023. And then let's check out the Flask template branch. So you can see what a Flask server looks like. So let's git reset hard again. And then git checkout Flask template. Okay, so we moved our application into this app directory. Yeah. And then we have this function in our main directory called run.py. So let's see what's happening here. Basically, we import Flask, the Flask module, and then we select a port to run our app on. So basically, a server will have a thing called a port, which is like an access point. So when we're hosting the application locally, we just specify a port. So here we have port 5000, and then we run this app. So let's see what the app looks like. So before, we have these 3 folders. Templates. Templates will include the HTML files that we made before, so like index.html. Static will include the CSS and JavaScript files. And then game will manage the roots. So basically, like the /easy, the /hard, the /over, and the index, right? So this is sort of the structure of a Flask app. And then here is where we sort of add these roots into our application. Basically, when you run create app, it generates this app with Flask, and then it adds some configuration files. So these actually aren't important right now, so we can get rid of it. Okay, right. Yeah, if you want to add any configuration, you can import it from a config file. But the important part here is this app.register blueprint. So this blueprint will create the roots, and then we register these blueprints to the app so that the app knows where these roots are. So it basically allows us to sort of move the roots into a different file and then add those roots back in to the main app. It's not too important, and you don't have to do it in 2 files, but it's just one way to add these roots. So let's see how we actually create them. So run.py runs the actual server with app.run. Init.py initializes the server. And then game/views.py are the views of the app, which is essentially all the roots. So you see we have the 1, 2, 3, 4 roots here. So here's the basic structure. Again, templates is where the HTML files live. The views.py helps us route pages. Static is where the static files, CSS, JavaScript, and images are stored. And then init will initialize this application. And in order to run the server, you just run Python 3 run.py. So let me quickly install Flask. And then, okay, let's see what's it. Port 5000 is already in use. Okay, so I can't use 5000 right now. So let me change my port to like 3002. Okay, cool. So now this server is running on this port. So you can see this word homepage. So where did that come from? Basically, in our root, we see this game.root/. So / is the homepage, the index page. And whenever I visit this page, it runs this function homepage. Does that make sense? So when I visit this / it returns homepage. So whatever it returns here, I want to see it right here on this root. So what if I wanted to see easy? What root should I go to? Yeah, so right here /easy, and then I get returned easy, right? So right now I'm just returning text, right? But once I connect my HTML files, I want to actually return the HTML files, right? So that when I visit this page, it shows me the file itself, right? And so the way we do this is with something called a template file. So let's see how we make those. So that's why they're inside of templates. Basically, we have to replace all the static files and add in our HTML file. So let's do that. So let's say instead of returning homepage, we want to return index. So essentially what we do is we write render template and then the name of the file. Does that make sense? So before we return just a string, now we want to return the HTML file. So now if I visit the original root, I don't have anything because I don't have anything in my file. But say I write an HTML file, include some header. This is a HTML file. Now if I visit, boom, it shows up. Does that make sense? So I used our Flask server to serve this HTML file on the index root. So now I have to add in the files we made before, right? So let's check those out. So let's see the slides. So we have our main root, which is return index.html. We should have the easy mode, which will return game.html, but we want to sort of tell the, so when we return the game.html, right? Notice that we're returning the same file in easy mode and hard mode, right? So how do we sort of tell, how do we know which mode we're in when we return game.html? Because before it would say like this is in hard mode, right? And this is in easy mode. And the JavaScript would know, right? So we need some way to serve different versions of the file with different roots, right? So this is where templating comes in. So we notice that we pass in this thing called mode. Basically, with the template, you can define different variables and how those variables appear in the HTML itself. So let me show you how that's done. Basically, say I have this HTML file here, right? And I want to include some parameter that the Flask server will pass in. So to do that, I basically put them in these like double brackets. So say I have like param here, right? So param is just the text. So right now, if I display it, it doesn't show anything because we didn't pass any parameters in. But if I want to set some value to this variable param, I can say render index.html and param equals some text, right? So this is the index page. So what happens here is I pass in the parameter. The parameter gets passed into the index.html file. Flask will search through this file and look for where I want to insert this variable param, and then it'll display that version of the file to me. Right. So now what will happen if I refresh this page?
It'll show this.
Yeah. This page. Pretty cool, right? So that allows us to sort of create different versions of the file and different versions of the file with different roots. So the idea here is so let me check out the current version. What's the main branch? What is main? So here, when I pass in mode easy, I want to display I'm in easy mode on the web page. So then the JavaScript knows that I'm in easy mode. So how that'll work is in game.html. Look what I have here. Title is what? Yeah, the parameter mode and then mode, right? So when I visit this root, they'll tell me that I'm in easy mode or in hard mode, depending on which link I'm at. So if I go to /easy, it says easy mode, right? If I go to /hard, I'm in hard mode. Make sense? Cool. And finally, so what if I wanted to display a different value depending on the root? So this is something we can do with Flask. So for example, in the over page, if I get something wrong. Yeah, what's up?
No, screen.
Oh, screen. Oh, oops. Okay, so look at my URL, right? I'm at /over/0, right? And then it says my score is 0. So there's some sort of communication happening between the actual root and the page itself, right? So if I want to change my score to like 1,000, I just put /1000 and it displays there, right? So how do I do that with Flask? So the way you do that is basically in your root, you define a root and you put it inside of these angle braces, score, and whatever you put here will pass in as a parameter to the function. So then I can simply render the template with my score equal to the score value. And then I go to over.html, I have score is equal to score. So pretty cool, right? So that's how I can access different parameters from the URL itself. Yeah. So those are basically the roots of the page. So let's see, what more slides do we have? Yeah, so here we have to modify the HTML files. So one more thing real quick is we do have to change how we're importing the CSS files. So in Flask, whenever you use a template, they have this like custom variable called like URL4. So it knows to look at my static directory when I'm referencing these like static files. So if I say like URL4 static and then the file name asset/logo, it knows to look in asset/logo.png. Similarly for JavaScript, where's my JavaScript file? I don't think, am I referencing it here or index? That's it. Okay, so in game.html, same thing here. URL4 static, file name JS. Okay, cool. So that's pretty much the main components of hosting a HTML application with Flask. So yeah, we have to modify these two files and modify them to include the templated code. And then boom, we're done. So once I visit our homepage hosted by the Flask server, am I running it right now? Yeah. So on localhost 3002, welcome. So you have these two buttons. This will link me to /easy. This will link me to /hard. Remember we did that with the A tags here. So href/easy, href/hard, easy mode. I'm here. Notice the numbers are smaller because the JavaScript knows that if I'm in easy mode, it reads the word easy, sees that I'm in easy mode, picks two numbers that are between like 1 and like 30 or 30 something, right? And then each time I get it right, the JavaScript knows to increment the score, and then it'll give me a new problem, right? And then if I get it wrong, there's a new event listener that'll redirect me to the /over and then /to page. So we see in JavaScript here. If I get it wrong, basically the way you redirect in JavaScript is you write window.location.replace and then /over/ the score variable which we were storing. Cool. And if I press try again, that'll link me back to the home page. Great. So that's how we made our app with HTML, CSS, and Flask to host. Any questions?
It's like, is like Flash very common? I don't like people see like React, like.
Yeah, so React is different from Flask. So basically, we wrote our website with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? So React is basically a way to replace that portion of the web application, not the backend part. The backend part is what serves the roots and serves the content. But if you want to write the front end, people might use React for that. So React is basically a framework that allows you to write HTML and JavaScript in a more like systematic way that makes making reactive content easier to write. But you need some way to turn React code into raw HTML, JavaScript, CSS that the browser can understand, right? So it's basically like you write stuff in React and then you convert that React stuff into HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? Like we just wrote, and then you write the Flask server to serve that content back to you, right? So people will use React, but they use React as the front end and still use Flask as the back end. Yeah. So React is not like won't replace Flask, but it might replace the first part of like making the website and like, your user interface itself. Yeah, so Next.js is also another like yeah, so Next does have server-side routing. I've never used Next before, but I believe you can create like endpoints with Next itself. Oh yeah.
Cool. All right, thank you guys.
Yeah.
for sure.
So if you want to look at the code, you can simply go to the How to Hack 2023
Okay.
repository on /techx. And you can clone it yourself and try to run it yourself. Yeah, you're making a website. Are you coming to Hack this weekend? Yeah, so like you can make a website with Flask. This is new knowledge.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go. Okay. Thank you guys.
All right. Yes. Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks for
Go.
coming.
Thank you. See ya.
Yeah. End the Zoom meeting.